Okay, so you guys sent in some really interesting stuff, and this time is no different. Really makes you think, about how history can, well, how can I put it, like rhyme.
Yeah, I see what you mean, like echo across the ages.
Exactly. It's this piece, by Lev Neymotin. It's called Bismarck to Putin, a follow-up, I guess, to some thoughts he had on, X, that whole thing.
Right, and I think what we're really looking at here is like this warning, right? This warning that, has been it's been around for a while. A warning against preventative war, like trying to, stop a war before it even starts. And how relevant is that to Putin? To what's going on right now with Russia? Yeah,
exactly. Like, can we really learn something from some, 19th century dude, Bismarck, this like Iron Chancellor guy?
Yeah.
Can his wisdom actually tell us something about what's happening in the 21st century with Russia?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? It's a pretty big one.
Yeah. It is. But what we're going to try to do, Teddy, is like, we're going to break it down. We're going to look at what Bismarck was actually saying, like what was this warning? And then we're going to try to like hold it up to what Putin's been doing and see if there's any like, overlap. See if there's anything there that can help us understand, what's going on.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's important to remember like who Bismarck was, right? Like you said, Iron Chancellor. He unified Germany, right? Late 19th century. This guy, I mean, he was a master of realpolitik.
Okay, so realpolitik, like playing hardball, right?
Yeah, exactly, like power politics, right? But the thing about Bismarck, he wasn't just about like brute force,
So let's get to the point. What's the big takeaway from Bismarck that this essay keeps bringing up?
All right, well, there's this quote. I mean, it's a pretty famous one, actually. Bismarck said, "Preventative war is like committing suicide out of fear of death."
Whoa, okay, that's pretty dark.
It's
like, really?
Right. And the essay, it argues that this is not just some like, clever saying. It's like real strategic insight that we can still learn from today. Like it's that deep.
Okay, I'm with you. Suicide out of fear of death. I mean, it's like a paradox or something, right? But Bismarck, he wasn't afraid of war, was he? I mean, he unified Germany through war.
Right. But that's the thing. He wasn't afraid of it, but he knew it was a tool. And once he used it, to unify Germany, his goal shifted, like big time. His main thing became keeping the peace. He really understood that just winning a war, that's only half the battle, right? You got to figure out how to deal with everybody after the fighting stops, all those other countries.
So what, he was like a master chess player or something?
Yeah.
Like thinking 10 moves ahead.
Exactly. Like he built this like crazy system of alliances, right? All designed to keep Germany from being ganged up on or dragged into some, stupid war that could like wreck everything he'd built.
That's pretty smart. So I guess what you're saying is Bismarck didn't see preventive war as some kind of power move, but more like a big miscalculation.
Yeah, that's it. Like, Neymotin says Bismarck thought it was like, you don't understand the situation, you're afraid of something that might happen, so you rush into a war that's going to cost you right now, today. Like, you're trading real security for, some imagined threat in the future.
That's a good point. But the essay says Putin, he's got a whole different approach, right? Like Bismarck, he was all about being cautious, but Putin seems to think you got to strike first if you want to survive.
That's the heart of the issue, right? When you look at the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the reasons they gave stopping NATO, protecting Russian speakers, it's all about acting first. Like they wanted to take out a threat before it got too big.
But it kind of seems like it backfired, right? Like things haven't exactly gone according to plan for Putin.
Yeah, not really. Instead of making Russia safer, it's kind of the opposite. They got hit with all these economic sanctions, NATO's gotten stronger and more united, and there's a lot more pressure on Putin from inside Russia, and of course the war. It's dragged on. It's been brutal, and there's no end in sight.
Yeah, so it's like the opposite of what they were hoping for. The essay calls it cruel irony.
Yeah.
Right? Like they tried to stop Russia from getting weaker and it just made them weaker.
That's a great way to put it. And it's almost like this suicide of vision. That's what Neymotin calls it. Like, Russia had these big goals and now they're so scared of what might happen. They're stuck just defending themselves. It's like they're suffocating their own future.
Yeah. Like they're so busy looking over their shoulder they can't see where they're going. Okay, so let's switch gears a bit. What's the main difference between how Bismarck and Putin, how they handled things? Like one's this 19th century guy, the other's a 21st century leader. But what's the big difference in their style?
Well, Bismarck, he was all about patience, right? Like, he knew when to use force, but he was also careful. He always thought about the consequences, like what could go wrong. Putin, on the other hand, he's more like, you hesitate, you lose.
Yeah.
He acts fast, and that's probably because he's scared.
So Bismarck, he was playing the long game, right? Like, thinking about the future.
Yeah, totally. And Germany back then, they had a powerful military. But Bismarck, he kept them safe by being a diplomat.
Yeah.
By talking to other countries, making deals.
And the essay, it even points out those times when Germany didn't listen to Bismarck.
Exactly. 1914, 1939. Both times they decided to, jump into a preventative war. And, well, we all know how those turned out. 2 world wars. Like, talk about unintended consequences.
Right, yeah. So the essay saying that Russia, right now, they're at this crossroads, right? Like, they could have chosen a different path. And maybe, just maybe, they still can.
Yeah, I think that's the message Neymotin's trying to get across. Like, hey, we can still learn from history. Stop being so scared and actually think about the long term.
And, he ends the essay with this really powerful line. He's talking directly to Putin. He says, "The graveyards of history are full of leaders who feared too much and thought too little." I mean, that's got to sting a little, right?
Oh, definitely. And it really drives home the point, True strength, it's not about lashing out because you're scared. It's about thinking things through.
Yeah. So if we're going to wrap this up, like, what's the big takeaway from this whole Bismarck to Putin essay?
Well, I think it's that Bismarck's warning, even though it's like 100 years old, it still matters. It helps us understand what's happening in the world today, especially when we see how different Bismarck's approach was compared to, how the essay argues Putin's acting.
Yeah, totally. Bismarck, he was all about being careful, thinking long term, realpolitik, but with a bit of like wisdom sprinkled in.
Exactly. And so the question is, like, what happens when leaders focus too much on like immediate threats? They're so scared of what might happen that they forget about like diplomacy and patience. Like, what does that do to the world?
That's a great question. It makes you wonder, like, are there other historical figures, other leaders who dealt with power and conflict in ways that we can learn from today? Like, what other lessons are hiding out there in history, just waiting for us to rediscover them?
No, that's something worth thinking about.
It is. All right. Well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.
See you then.